The unforgiving sun beat down on Winona Keller as she stared helplessly at the broken axle of her wagon, stranded on the dusty trail 15 miles outside of Julesburg, Colorado territory. It was 1875, and the 24-year-old schoolteacher had never felt more alone in her life as she wiped the perspiration from her brow and surveyed the barren landscape stretching endlessly in all directions. Winona had left St. Louis 3 weeks ago, determined to reach her new teaching position before the school term began. The journey west had tested her in ways she never imagined: harsh weather, difficult terrain, and the constant worry of traveling alone. But nothing compared to the hollow feeling in her stomach as she examined the splintered wood of the wagon axle. "This cannot be happening," she muttered, pushing a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. Her supplies would last another week at most, and the nearest town was at least a day's walk in the merciless heat. The 2 horses that pulled her wagon grazed nearby, untroubled by their predicament. Winona had just decided to unhitch one of the horses and ride for help when she heard the rhythmic sound of hoofbeats approaching from the east. Her heart quickened. Encounters on the open trail could mean salvation or danger. She reached for the small revolver her father had insisted she carry, tucking it into the folds of her skirt. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. As he drew closer, Winona could make out a tall figure atop a handsome chestnut stallion. The man wore a weather-beaten hat pulled low over his eyes, and his duster was covered with the dust of the trail. "Afternoon, madam," the stranger called as he approached, raising his hand in greeting. "Looks like you've had some trouble." "The axle broke about an hour ago," Winona replied, her hand still near the hidden revolver. "I was just preparing to ride for assistance." The rider dismounted with fluid grace, revealing his considerable height. When he removed his hat, Winona was struck by a pair of kind but weathered blue eyes set in a sun-bronzed face. He couldn't have been more than 30 years old, but the lines around his eyes suggested he'd seen his share of hardship. "Name's Adam Quincy," he said, extending a calloused hand. "I was heading to Julesburg myself when I spotted your wagon." "Winona Keller," she replied, accepting his handshake with hesitation. "I'm traveling to Julesburg as well. I'm to be the new schoolteacher there." Adam nodded, then walked to her wagon and crouched to examine the broken axle. "This is a clean break. I might be able to fashion a temporary repair that'll get you to town." He glanced up at her. "With your permission, of course." Relief flooded through Winona, though caution kept her from fully embracing it. "I would be most grateful, Mr. Quincy, but I wouldn't want to delay your journey." Adam offered a smile that transformed his rugged features. "No delay at all, Miss Keller. I've got nowhere pressing to be, and it wouldn't be right to leave you stranded out here." For the next hour, Winona watched as Adam worked. He retrieved tools from his saddlebags and salvaged wood from her supplies to fashion a makeshift repair. His hands moved with practiced skill, and Winona found herself studying him with growing curiosity. "Have you been a cowboy long, Mr. Quincy?" she asked as he hammered the repair into place. "Since I was 16, he replied without looking up. "Worked ranches all over Wyoming, Montana, Texas. Been drifting the last few years, taking work where I can find it." He paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "And you, Miss Keller, what brings a schoolteacher all the way from St. Louis?" she supplied. "I answered an advertisement. The town needs a teacher and she hesitated. "I needed a fresh start." Adam nodded, asking no further questions, and Winona was grateful for his discretion. The broken engagement and scandal she'd left behind in St. Louis were wounds still too fresh to discuss with a stranger. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Adam secured the last of the repair. "This should hold until we reach Julesburg, but we'll need to travel slow. The trail's rough in places." Winona questioned. "If you've no objections, I'd like to escort you to town." "That repair might need adjustment along the way, and these parts can be dangerous for a lone traveler." Winona weighed her options. She had already lost precious time, and while the repair looked solid, she knew nothing about maintaining it. More importantly, the thought of continuing alone after this close call made her stomach knot with anxiety. "I would appreciate the company, Mr. Quincy, thank you." Adam tipped his hat. "We'll set out at first light tomorrow, best to make camp here for the night." As dusk settled over the plains, they made camp beside the wagon. Adam built a small fire and offered to share his provisions, but Winona insisted on cooking from her own supplies. She prepared a simple stew, and they ate in companionable silence as the stars emerged overhead. "You're a fine cook, Miss Keller," Adam commented, setting his empty bowl aside. "The children of Julesburg are fortunate to have such a talented teacher coming their way." Winona smiled, the compliment warming her more than she expected. "You're very kind, Mr. Quincy." "I only hope I can meet their expectations." "Julesburg is a growing town but still rough around the edges," Adam said, feeding another stick to the fire. "They've been without a proper teacher for nearly a year." "Are you familiar with the town?" Winona asked, curious about her new home. Adam's expression shifted slightly. "I've passed through a few times. It sits at the crossing of several trails and the railroad, so it sees all types." He hesitated. "It's a decent place, though like anywhere, it has its share of troubles." They talked into the evening, Adam sharing stories of his travels while Winona spoke of her teaching experiences. She found herself relaxing in his presence, his steady manner and quiet strength reassuring after weeks of solitary travel. As the fire burned low, Adam stood and stretched. "I'll sleep on the other side of the wagon, Miss Keller. You'll have your privacy, but I'll be close if there's any trouble." "Thank you, Mr. Quincy, for everything." In the darkness of her wagon, Winona listened to the night sounds of the prairie, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of wind through the grass, the occasional snort from the horses. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe enough to drift into a deep, untroubled sleep. Morning came with a spectacular sunrise that painted the eastern sky in hues of pink and gold. Winona emerged from her wagon to find Adam already tending to the horses and checking his repair on the axle. "It held well overnight," he reported. "With some luck, it'll get us all the way to Julesburg." They broke camp efficiently, and within an hour they were back on the trail. Adam rode alongside the wagon, occasionally falling back to check the axle or scout ahead. The day grew hot, but clouds provided occasional relief from the sun. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses beside a small creek. As Winona refilled her water containers, Adam pointed to a distant plume of dust on the horizon. "Riders," he said, his tone suddenly alert. 5, maybe 6 of them." Winona felt her heart quicken. "Is that unusual?" "Could be nothing," Adam replied, but his hand moved to rest on the revolver at his hip. "But best we be cautious. Get back to the wagon, please." Winona complied, watching anxiously as the riders drew closer. Adam positioned himself between her wagon and the approaching group, his posture relaxed but vigilant. The riders slowed as they neared, and Winona could see they were a rough-looking bunch trail-worn men with unshaven faces and hard eyes. Their leader, a burly man with a thick beard, raised his hand in greeting. "Afternoon," he called. "Fine day for traveling." "That it is," Adam replied evenly. "Something we can help you with." The leader's eyes drifted to Winona, then back to Adam. "Just passing through." "Headed to Fort Morgan on business." His gaze lingered on the wagon. "Saw you folks stopped here and thought we'd check if you needed assistance." "Appreciate the offer," Adam said, "but we're managing just fine." A tense silence followed, broken only by the sound of horses snorting and the creek bubbling nearby. Winona held her breath, acutely aware of how vulnerable they were. "Well then," the leader finally said, "we'll be on our way. Safe travels." He tipped his hat toward Winona before signaling to his men, and the group continued on their journey, kicking up dust as they rode south. Adam watched them until they were specks on the horizon before turning back to Winona. "They're gone now. Best we move on ourselves." "Who were they?" Winona asked as they resumed their journey, Adam's expression was grim. Not sure, but men like that, traveling in groups, usually aren't up to any good, could be rustlers or worse. You think they might have robbed us, or worse, Adam repeated quietly. It's why I didn't want you traveling alone, Miss Keller. The frontier can be unforgiving to the unwary. His concern touched her, but also reinforced the peril of her situation. Had he not come along when he did, she might have faced those men alone. They traveled another 10 miles before the axle began to show signs of strain. Adam stopped to make adjustments, working quickly as the afternoon waned. Winona watched him, noting the efficiency of his movements and the gentleness with which he treated her horses. You have a way with animals, she observed. Adam smiled, patting the nearest horse. They're honest creatures, no pretense about them. He finished securing the repair. Unlike people. You don't seem to have much faith in mankind, Mr. Quincy, Winona remarked. I've seen enough to be cautious, he replied, but I still believe in the goodness of some. His eyes met hers briefly before he returned to his work. As dusk approached, they made camp in a sheltered hollow. Adam hunted a jackrabbit for their supper, and Winona prepared it with herbs from her supplies. They ate beneath a canopy of stars so brilliant that Winona found herself marveling at the sight. It's beautiful, she whispered. I've never seen stars so clear. One of the few advantages of being far from civilization, Adam agreed, leaning back against his saddle. No city lights to dim them. They sat in comfortable silence, the crackling fire between them. Winona found herself studying Adam's profile, wondering about the life he'd led and the experiences that had shaped him. There was a depth to him that intrigued her, a quiet strength combined with unexpected gentleness. May I ask you something, Mr. Quincy? She ventured. Adam, he corrected. After sharing a campfire for 2 nights, I think we can dispense with formalities, don't you? Adam, she agreed, smiling, and you may call me Winona. What did you want to ask, Winona? She hesitated, unsure if she was overstepping. What are your plans once we reach Julesburg? You mentioned you've been drifting. Adam was quiet for a moment, poking at the fire with a stick. Hadn't thought that far ahead. There's usually ranch work to be found, especially with spring coming, or I might press on to Wyoming. Heard they need experienced hands up that way. No place you call home? A shadow crossed his features. Not anymore. Had a small spread in Montana once, lost it a few years back during a bad winter. He didn't elaborate and Winona didn't press. I'm sorry, she said simply. Adam shrugged. Life out here teaches you to adapt or perish. I've been adapting ever since. He looked at her across the fire. What about you? Any family waiting for news of your safe arrival? It was Winona's turn to look away. My father died last year. My mother's been gone since I was a child. I have an aunt in Boston, but we're not close. She took a deep breath. In truth, there's no one expecting letters from me. Seems we're both alone in the world, Adam observed. Perhaps that's why our paths crossed, Winona replied, surprising herself with the sentiment. Divine providence. Adam's lips quirked in a half smile. Could be. Or just lucky timing on my part. The next day brought challenges as they navigated a particularly rough stretch of trail. The makeshift repair held, but Adam kept a watchful eye on it, stopping frequently to make adjustments. By midday, dark clouds had gathered on the western horizon. Storm's coming, Adam announced, studying the sky. We need to find shelter soon. They pushed on, hoping to reach a suitable campsite before the weather turned. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Winona's horses grew skittish as lightning flashed in the distance. There, Adam pointed to a formation of rocks and trees ahead. That should provide some protection. They had just reached the shelter when the heavens opened. Rain fell in sheets, turning the trail behind them into mud within minutes. Adam helped Winona secure her wagon against the wind, then worked quickly to erect a canvas lean-to for additional protection. Lightning split the sky, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder that spooked the horses. Adam moved swiftly to calm them, speaking in low, soothing tones until they settled. They'll be all right, he assured Winona as he joined her under the lean-to. Though we might be stuck here a while, these spring storms can be unpredictable. Huddled together against the elements, they watched as nature unleashed its fury around them. Water streamed off the canvas overhead, and wind whipped through the trees, but their small shelter remained secure. "I've never seen such a violent storm," Winona admitted, drawing her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "It'll pass," Adam replied, though his expression was concerned as he watched a nearby creek begin to swell with rainwater. "The danger is flash flooding in these parts." As if confirming his words, the creek rose rapidly, water spilling over its banks and creeping toward their camp. Adam cursed under his breath. "We need to move to higher ground," he decided, already on his feet. "The horses first, then whatever we can salvage from the wagon." Working together in the driving rain, they led the frightened horses to the rocky outcropping above their camp. Adam then helped Winona gather her most important belongings from the wagon before the rising water reached it. "My books." Winona cried as she remembered the trunk of school books she'd brought for her new position. "They're still in the wagon." Before Adam could stop her, she splashed back toward the vehicle, now standing in nearly a foot of swiftly moving water. As she reached for the trunk, the current caught her skirts, nearly pulling her off her feet. Strong hands caught her waist, steadying her. Adam had followed, his expression a mixture of exasperation and concern. "I've got you," he shouted over the storm. "The trunk too, but we need to move now." Together they managed to drag the heavy trunk from the wagon, just as water began to seep into its bed. They struggled back to higher ground, the rain plastering their clothing to their bodies and turning the earth beneath their feet to treacherous mud. Safe on the rocky ledge, they collapsed beside each other, breathing heavily. Water streamed from their sodden clothes, and Winona's hair had come loose from its pins, falling in wet tangles around her face. "That was foolish," Adam admonished, though there was no real anger in his voice. "Books can be replaced, you cannot." "They're more than just books to me," Winona explained, pushing wet hair from her eyes. "They represent everything I'm hoping to build in Julesburg, a new life, a purpose." Adam's expression softened. "I understand, but next time let me help you." "That's why I'm here." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. Winona became acutely aware of his proximity, of the way his shirt clung to the contours of his chest, of the raindrops clinging to his eyelashes. The spell was broken by a particularly loud thunderclap that made them both start. Adam cleared his throat and moved to secure their meager shelter against the continuing storm. They spent a miserable night huddled beneath the canvas, the ground beneath them turning to mud despite their best efforts. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the damage was done. The creek had receded, leaving behind a scene of destruction. Winona's wagon stood half buried in mud, its contents soaked. The axle repair had held, but one of the wheels had sunk deep into the mire, and it would take considerable effort to free it. "This complicates things," Adam said, surveying the damage. "We'll need to dry out your supplies and get that wheel unstuck. Might lose a day, maybe more." Winona felt a wave of despair as she looked at the sodden books she'd risked so much to save. "Will they be ruined? We'll dry them page by page if we have to," Adam assured her. "But first, let's get a fire going. We both need to warm up before we catch our death." They spent the morning gathering dry wood from beneath the rocky overhang and laying out Winona's belongings to dry in the emerging sun. Adam fashioned a rack from branches to hold the damp pages of her books open to the warmth. As they worked side by side, Winona found herself stealing glances at her companion. There was something about Adam Quincy that drew her a quiet strength, a steadfast reliability that she'd rarely encountered in men before. By afternoon, they had dried enough of their supplies to make a comfortable camp, but the wagon remained firmly stuck. Adam fashioned levers from tree branches and spent hours trying to free the wheel from the mud, but with limited success. "We might need to unload the entire wagon," he finally admitted, wiping sweat from his brow. "Make it lighter before we can move it." They began the laborious process of removing everything from the wagon, creating a pile of Winona's worldly possessions on higher ground. As they worked, Adam discovered something about the axle repair. "It's not holding as well as I'd hoped," he said, examining the splintered wood. "I can reinforce it, but what we really need is a proper replacement." "How far are we from Julesburg now?" Winona asked, trying to hide her growing anxiety. "About a day's ride under normal circumstances," Adam replied. "But with the wagon in this condition and the trail washed out in places." He shook his head. "Could be 2 days, maybe 3. Winona sat heavily on a nearby rock, the full weight of their situation settling on her shoulders. "I'm supposed to begin teaching next week. What if we don't make it in time?" Adam crouched beside her, his expression earnest. "We'll get you there, Winona, I promise you that." She looked into his eyes and saw determination there and something else that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without your help." "You'd have managed," he said with a small smile. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." His words warmed her, and she found herself returning his smile. For a moment, they remained that way, gazing at each other with growing awareness. The spell was broken by the distant howl of a coyote, reminding them of the approaching evening. They resumed their work with renewed purpose, finally managing to lighten the wagon enough to free it from the mud by sunset. That night, their camp was more comfortable, with dry bedding and warm food. As they sat beside the fire, Winona found herself opening up about her past. "I was engaged once," she admitted quietly, "to a banker's son in St. Louis. We were to be married last autumn." Adam looked at her with interest but didn't press. "What happened?" Winona stared into the flames. "I discovered he was involved with another woman, had been for years, apparently." She gave a bitter laugh. "When I confronted him, he saw no reason why he couldn't have both of us, me as his respectable wife and her as his. Diversion." "Sounds like a fool," Adam commented, "perhaps, but the real scandal came when I broke the engagement publicly. His family was influential, and they made sure everyone knew it was because I was unstable and hysterical." Her voice hardened. "No one would hire me to teach after that, so when I saw the advertisement for Julesburg, I seized the opportunity." Adam was quiet for a moment. "Takes courage to leave everything behind and start fresh." "Or desperation," Winona countered. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm running away rather than toward something." "Does it matter?" Adam asked. "Either way, you're moving forward." His perspective surprised her. Most people she knew would have judged her decision, finding it either foolhardy or scandalous for a woman to journey alone into the frontier. "What about you?" she asked. "What are you running from, Adam Quincy?" The question hung in the air between them. Adam poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. "Ghosts, mostly," he finally replied. "Mistakes I can't undo." Winona waited, sensing there was more he might share if given time. "I had a wife once," he continued after a long pause, "and a son. They died during that winter I mentioned, the one where I lost the ranch." "I'm so sorry," Winona whispered, heart aching for him. "Influenza took them both within a week of each other. I couldn't." He cleared his throat. "I couldn't save them. Then the bank took the land when I couldn't keep up the payments. After that, there didn't seem much point in staying put anywhere." Winona reached across the space between them and placed her hand on his. "How long ago?" 4 years this winter," he said. "Long enough that the sharp edges have dulled some." His hand turned beneath hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. The simple connection felt profound to Winona, two wounded souls finding momentary solace in each other's company. They sat that way for a long time, hands linked, watching the fire burn down to embers. Neither spoke of what might happen once they reached Julesburg or of the growing attachment forming between them. Some things, Winona thought, were too fragile to name just yet. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Adam reinforced the axle repair as best he could, and they set out once more, the wagon moving slowly over the muddy trail. Progress was painstaking, with frequent stops to rest the horses and check the wheels. By mid-afternoon, they encountered another obstacle, a section of trail completely washed away by the storm. A ravine now cut across their path, too steep and wide for the wagon to cross. "We'll have to find another route," Adam decided after surveying the damage. "There should be an old buffalo trail that branches north about a mile back. It's longer, but it might be our only option." The detour added hours to their journey, taking them through terrain rougher than they'd yet encountered. Twice they had to stop to free the wagon wheels from deep ruts, and the constant strain was taking its toll on the makeshift axle repair. As the sun began to set, Adam's concerns were realized when they heard a sharp crack. The wagon lurched sickeningly to one side as the repaired axle finally gave way completely. "That's it," Adam said after examining the damage. "We can't continue with the wagon, not without a proper repair." Winona looked at her belongings, the books, clothing, and teaching supplies she'd brought to start her new life. "What do we do now?" Adam considered their options. "We're still at least a day's ride from Julesburg. We could leave the wagon here, pack what we can on the horses, and I could come back with proper tools after we reach town." "Would my things be safe?" Winona asked, worried about abandoning everything she owned. "We'll hide what we can't take," Adam assured her. "Cover the wagon with branches." "It's not ideal, but I don't see another choice if we want to reach Julesburg before your teaching position is given to someone else." They spent the remaining daylight sorting through Winona's possessions, selecting what was essential to take with them. Her books were the heaviest items, but she insisted on bringing as many as possible. Adam didn't argue, understanding their importance to her. That night, their camp was subdued. The breakdown of the wagon had dampened their spirits, and the prospect of leaving most of Winona's belongings behind weighed heavily on her mind. "What if they're not here when we return?" she fretted as they ate a simple supper. "Then we'll replace what we can," Adam said practically. "The important thing is getting you to Julesburg safely." Winona nodded, though her heart ached at the thought of losing the carefully selected items she'd brought to furnish her new home and classroom. Many had belonged to her father, tangible connections to the life and family she'd left behind. "We should reach town by tomorrow evening if we start at first light," Adam continued. "I know the station master there. He might be able to send a wagon back with us to retrieve your things." "You've been so kind," Winona said, looking at him across the fire. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Adam smiled, the warmth of it reaching his eyes. "Seeing you safely established as Julesburg's new schoolteacher will be payment enough." There was something in his tone that made Winona wonder if he truly meant to continue on his way once they reached town. The thought of parting from him created an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. "What will you do in Julesburg?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Will you stay long?" Adam shrugged. "Hadn't planned that far ahead. Might look for work at one of the nearby ranches, at least until I earn enough to outfit myself properly again." Hope flickered in Winona's heart. "So you might remain in the area for some time?" "I might," he agreed, his eyes meeting hers. "Especially if there was a reason to stay." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Winona felt her cheeks warm and she looked away, unsure how to respond to the possibility his words suggested. They rose before dawn the next day, packing their few belongings onto the horses. Adam had fashioned a travois from branches to carry more of Winona's possessions, attaching it to his stallion who accepted the burden stoically. With the wagon hidden as best they could manage and a marker placed to help them find it again, they set out for Julesburg. Adam insisted Winona ride his horse while he walked alongside, leading her two horses with the makeshift travois between them. The day grew warm, and their progress was slow but steady. They stopped at midday beside a clear stream, resting the horses and sharing a simple meal of jerky and hardtack. "Tell me about your plans for teaching," Adam said as they rested in the shade of a cottonwood tree. "What will you teach the children of Julesburg?" Winona's face lit up at the question. "The basics, of course, reading, writing, arithmetic, but I want to go beyond that." History, literature, natural sciences. She gestured to the world around them. There's so much to learn, even here on the frontier. Ambitious, Adam commented with approval. Education is freedom, Winona said passionately. It opens doors, creates opportunities. These children might grow up to build railroads, discover new medicines, write great works of literature. She smiled at his amused expression. You think I'm being foolish? Not at all, Adam replied. I think you're remarkable. The simple compliment struck Winona speechless. In that moment, looking at Adam's sincere expression, she realized how deeply she'd come to care for this man who'd appeared in her life just days ago. They continued their journey through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they approached more settled territory. By late afternoon, they could see smoke from distant chimneys on the horizon, the first sign of Julesburg. There it is, Adam said, pointing to the settlement nestled in the valley before them. We'll be there before nightfall. Winona felt a conflicting rush of emotions, relief at reaching their destination, excitement about beginning her new position, and apprehension about what would happen between her and Adam once they arrived. As they descended into the valley, the town came into clearer view. Julesburg was larger than Winona had expected, with a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above them, and the railroad station at the far end. People moved about on their evening business, and horses and wagons created a lively scene of frontier commerce. They drew curious glances as they entered town, a woman riding a fine horse, followed by a dusty cowboy leading 2 more horses loaded with belongings. Adam directed them toward the boarding house at the end of the main street, where arrangements had been made for Winona's accommodation. Mrs. Thelma Haggerty, the boarding house proprietor, was a stout woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She stood on the porch as they approached, arms folded across her ample bosom. "You'd be Miss Keller, I reckon," she called as they drew near. "Was beginning to wonder if you'd changed your mind about coming." "I apologize for the delay, Mrs. Haggerty," Winona replied as Adam helped her dismount. "We encountered some difficulties on the trail." Mrs. Haggerty's gaze shifted to Adam, her expression instantly suspicious. "And who might this be?" "Adam Quincy, madam," he answered, removing his hat. "I had the good fortune to assist Miss Keller when her wagon axle broke east of here." The older woman's eyes narrowed as she assessed him. "Well, Mr. Quincy, I'll thank you for delivering our new schoolteacher safely, but I'll take charge of her now." Winona felt a flash of irritation at being discussed as if she were a package. "Mr. Quincy has been invaluable to me, Mrs. Haggerty. In fact, we need to arrange transportation to retrieve the rest of my belongings, which we were forced to leave with my disabled wagon." Mrs. Haggerty's expression softened slightly. "I see. Well, come inside, both of you. You look like you could use a hot meal and a wash. We can discuss logistics after you've rested." The boarding house was clean and simply furnished, with a large dining room and a parlor for guests. Mrs. Haggerty showed Winona to a small but comfortable bedroom on the second floor, while Adam was directed to the livery stable where he could tend to the horses and inquire about temporary lodging for himself. "Dinner's at 6 sharp," Mrs. Haggerty informed them. "Don't be late, or you'll go hungry till breakfast." Alone in her room, Winona sank onto the bed, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She'd made it to Julesburg, her new home, the place where she hoped to build a fresh start. Yet instead of feeling triumphant, she felt oddly hollow, already missing Adam's reassuring presence. After washing and changing into one of the few clean dresses she'd managed to bring, Winona made her way downstairs for dinner. The dining room contained 3 other boarders, an elderly gentleman who introduced himself as Dr. Patterson, the town physician, Miss Abernathy, a spinster who worked at the general store, and Mr. Holloway, a young clerk from the railroad office. Adam arrived precisely at 6, freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt, though his trail-worn appearance still marked him as different from the other guests. He took the empty chair beside Winona, offering her a small smile that eased some of the tension she'd been feeling. Conversation flowed easily during the meal, with the other boarders eager to hear news from the East and details of their journey. Adam spoke little, answering direct questions politely but otherwise content to let Winona do the talking. "The school board is anxious to meet you, Miss Keller, Doctor." Patterson informed her over dessert. "They've called a special meeting for tomorrow afternoon at the church." "So soon?" Winona asked, surprised. "The children have been without proper instruction for months," Miss Abernathy explained. "Parents are getting restless." "I'll be ready," Winona assured them, though privately she worried about making a good impression without her teaching materials and books. After dinner, the boarders retired to the parlor for coffee, but Adam excused himself, explaining he needed to make arrangements for retrieving Winona's wagon. "I'll speak with the station master tonight," he told her quietly. "With luck, we can head back out tomorrow morning." Winona questioned, hope rising in her chest. "If you wish to come along," Adam said. "They're your belongings, after all." "I would like that," she replied, conscious of Mrs. Haggerty watching them with disapproving eyes from across the room. Adam nodded. "I'll return at first light then. Good night, Miss Keller." The formality of his address stung slightly after the intimacy they'd developed on the trail, but Winona understood its necessity in their current surroundings. "Good night, Mr. Quincy, and thank you." Sleep eluded Winona that night despite her comfortable bed. Her mind raced with thoughts of the school board meeting, worries about her abandoned possessions, and most persistently, questions about Adam Quincy and what role, if any, he would play in her new life. Dawn was just breaking when a soft knock at her door roused her from fitful slumber. She opened it to find Mrs. Haggerty standing there, a disapproving set to her mouth. "That cowboy of yours is downstairs," she announced. "Says you're going back out to fetch your wagon." "Yes, that's right," Winona confirmed, already moving to dress. "Has he arranged transportation?" "Got the station master's wagon and a couple of men to help," Mrs. Haggerty replied. "But Miss Keller, I feel I should warn you a respectable woman in your position should be careful about the company she keeps." Winona paused in pinning up her hair. "Mr. Quincy has been nothing but a gentleman, Mrs. Haggerty. I owe him a great deal." "I'm sure he has," the older woman conceded. "But Julesburg is a small town with big ears. Your reputation here is just beginning. It would be a shame to tarnish it before you've even taught your first lesson." The warning was clear, and Winona felt a flash of indignation. "I appreciate your concern," she said stiffly, "but I assure you there's nothing improper about Mr. Quincy assisting me in retrieving my belongings." Mrs. Haggerty shrugged. "As you say, breakfast is waiting whenever you're ready." She departed, leaving Winona to finish dressing with trembling hands. Adam was waiting in the dining room, a cup of coffee before him and his hat on the table. He rose when she entered, his eyes taking in her appearance with appreciation. "You look rested," he said. "Ready to retrieve your wagon?" "More than ready," Winona replied with more enthusiasm than she felt. Mrs. Haggerty's warning had unsettled her, reminding her of the social constraints that hadn't seemed to matter during their journey but now reasserted themselves with full force. Outside, a sturdy wagon waited, along with two rough-looking men who introduced themselves as Jake and Henry, employees of the station master. They set out immediately, retracing the route Winona and Adam had taken the previous day. The journey was faster with the wagon, but less pleasant for Winona. The easy camaraderie she'd shared with Adam seemed strained now, with Jake and Henry's presence creating a barrier between them. They reached the abandoned wagon by midday, relieved to find it undisturbed. The men set to work immediately, transferring Winona's belongings to their wagon and assessing the damage to her own. "Axles completely gone," Jake reported after examination. "We could probably fix it back in town, but it'd be easier to just haul the whole thing back." Adam agreed, and they spent the next hour securing Winona's wagon to the back of their own for towing. The work was hard in the midday heat, and Winona did what she could to help, ignoring the curious glances from Jake and Henry. By mid-afternoon, they were ready to return to Julesburg. The journey back was slow with the added weight, and conversation minimal as everyone concentrated on the difficult task of managing the linked wagons over the rough terrain. They reached town just as the sun was setting, drawing curious onlookers as they made their way to the livery stable where Winona's wagon would be repaired. News of their arrival spread quickly, and by the time they'd unloaded her possessions, several members of the school board had appeared to greet Julesburg's new teacher. Mayor Thornton, a portly man with an impressive mustache, stepped forward to welcome her. "Miss Keller, we're delighted you've arrived safely. We were beginning to worry." "The journey took longer than expected," Winona explained, conscious of her disheveled appearance after the day's work. "But I'm here now and eager to begin." "Excellent. We've scheduled a meeting for tomorrow at 3 o'clock at the church. The whole town is anxious to meet you." As the mayor continued talking, outlining plans for the school term and introducing other board members, Winona became aware that Adam had slipped away during the conversation. Looking around, she caught a glimpse of him leading the horses toward the stable, his tall figure silhouetted against the twilight sky. A sense of loss washed over her, unexpected in its intensity. In the space of a few days, this man had become important to her, more important than she'd been willing to admit, even to herself. "Miss Keller," Mayor Thornton's voice broke into her thoughts, "is everything all right?" "Yes, of course," she replied, forcing her attention back to the conversation. "I was just concerned about my belongings." "They'll be well taken care of," the mayor assured her. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we'll let you get settled in." Tomorrow is an important day for Julesburg. The crowd dispersed, and Winona found herself standing alone amid the bustle of the main street. Her possessions were being carried to the boarding house by volunteers, but there was no sign of Adam. Swallowing her disappointment, she made her way back to Mrs. Haggerty's, where a hot bath and dinner awaited. The other boarders were full of questions about her journey and excited about the prospect of the school reopening, but Winona found it difficult to match their enthusiasm. After dinner, she excused herself and retreated to her room, where she began organizing her teaching materials for the next day's meeting. The familiar task helped calm her troubled thoughts, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been left unresolved between her and Adam. A soft knock at her door startled her. Opening it, she found Mrs. Haggerty standing there with a folded piece of paper. "This came for you," the woman said, handing her the note. "From that cowboy." Winona's heart quickened as she accepted it. "Thank you, Mrs. Haggerty." Alone again, she unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. The message was brief. "Miss Keller, congratulations on reaching your destination safely. I've secured work at the Hamilton Ranch 5 miles west of town and will be departing at first light. I wish you every success in your new position. Respectfully, A. Quincy." The formal tone cut deeper than Winona had expected. No mention of seeing her again, no hint that their time together had meant anything to him beyond fulfilling his duty to see her safely to Julesburg. She sat heavily on the edge of her bed, the note clutched in her hand. Had she misread everything? The looks they'd exchanged, the conversations by firelight, the growing connection she'd felt had it all been one-sided. Sleep eluded her that night, and she rose early the next morning, her mind made up. Before her meeting with the school board, she had something important to do. The livery stable was already busy when she arrived, men coming and going with horses and equipment. Winona asked the stable hand about Adam and was directed to a small room at the back where he'd spent the night. She found him saddling his horse, preparations for departure clearly underway. He looked up in surprise when she entered. "Miss Keller," he said formally, straightening up. "I didn't expect to see you this morning." "Evidently not," she replied, holding up his note. "Were you really going to leave without saying goodbye?" Adam's expression was guarded. "I thought it best. You have your new life to begin, and I have work waiting." "I see." Winona stepped closer, studying his face. "And our time together on the trail that meant nothing." A muscle twitched in Adam's jaw. "It meant more than you know," he admitted quietly. "That's why I'm leaving." Confusion filled Winona. I don't understand, Adam sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look around you, Winona. You're the new school teacher, respected, educated, with a position of importance in this community. I'm a drifting cowboy with nothing to my name but this horse and what I can carry. What future could there possibly be in that? The truth of his words stung, but Winona refused to accept them as the final word. So you decided for both of us, without even discussing it? What was there to discuss? Adam countered. I saw how those people looked at you yesterday with respect, admiration. Then I saw how they looked at me with suspicion, judgment. Mrs. Haggerty made it quite clear what she thought of our association. Since when do you care what others think? Winona challenged. The man I came to know on the trail wouldn't let small-town gossip dictate his actions. Adam's expression softened. It's not about me, Winona, it's about you. Your reputation here is just beginning. I won't be the reason it's compromised before you've even started. His concern touched her, but also frustrated her. So you'll just ride away and we'll pretend none of it happened. The conversations, the connection we shared, it's for the best, Adam insisted, though the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Winona stepped even closer, close enough to see the conflict in his eyes. Is that truly what you want, Adam? To walk away from whatever this is between us without even giving it a chance? For a long moment, Adam was silent, the struggle plain on his face. Then, with a sigh that seemed to come from his very soul, he reached out and took her hands in his. No, he admitted. That's not what I want. But I don't see how. Then don't go, Winona interrupted. Not yet. Stay in Julesburg. Give us time to figure out what this could be. And your position, your standing in the community, will be determined by my abilities as a teacher, she insisted, not by whom I choose to associate with. Besides, she added with a small smile, I left St. Louis precisely to escape such narrow-minded thinking. I won't let it dictate my life here. Adam searched her face, hope warring with doubt in his expression. You're sure about this? It won't be easy. Few things worth having are, Winona replied simply. The tension drained from Adam's shoulders and a smile genuine and warm spread across his face. All right then, I'll stay. The job at Hamilton's ranch is real enough and it'll keep me close by. Relief and joy flooded through Winona. On impulse, she rose on tiptoes and pressed a kiss to his cheek. Come to the school board meeting this afternoon, she said. 3 o'clock at the church. Adam looked startled. Are you certain that's wise? Probably not, she admitted with a laugh, but I want you there anyway. With that, she turned and left the stable, her heart lighter than it had been in months. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The school board meeting was held in the small white church at the edge of town. When Winona arrived, the building was already filled with curious townspeople eager to meet their new teacher. She took a deep breath before entering, smoothing her best dress and touching the cameo at her throat for reassurance. The interior fell silent as she walked down the aisle to the front where Mayor Thornton and the other board members waited. Scanning the crowd, she felt a momentary pang of disappointment when she didn't see Adam among the faces. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Thornton began once Winona had taken her seat beside him. It is my great pleasure to introduce Miss Winona Keller, who has traveled all the way from St. Louis to become Julesburg's new schoolteacher. Applause filled the church and Winona smiled, trying to mask her nervousness. As the clapping subsided, the door at the back of the church opened and Adam slipped in, taking a position against the wall. Their eyes met briefly across the room and Winona felt her confidence surge. The meeting proceeded with introductions and questions from the board and community members. Winona outlined her teaching philosophy and plans for the school, winning over the audience with her passion and clear expertise. Even Mrs. Haggerty, seated in the third row with a skeptical expression, seemed grudgingly impressed. We plan to reopen the school next Monday, Mayor Thornton announced when the formal questioning had concluded, which gives Miss Keller a few days to settle in and prepare. Now, are there any final questions from the community? A woman near the front raised her hand. Miss Keller, we heard you had some trouble on your journey here. Would you mind telling us about it? All eyes turned to Winona, and she felt a moment's hesitation. This was an opportunity to establish the narrative on her own terms. I did indeed, she began. My wagon axle broke about 15 miles east of town. I was fortunate that Mr. Quincy happened along when he did. She gestured toward Adam, drawing everyone's attention to him. He not only repaired my axle well enough to continue, but escorted me the rest of the way when it became clear the repair might not hold. Without his assistance, I might still be stranded on the trail. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people turned to look at Adam, who appeared uncomfortable with the sudden attention. Well, we're certainly grateful to Mr. Quincy for delivering our teacher safely, Mayor Thornton said with a polite nod in Adam's direction. Now, if there are no further questions, I have one, came a voice from the back. It was Jake, one of the men who'd helped retrieve Winona's wagon. I'm curious about Mr. Quincy's background. Ain't seen you around these parts before, mister. The question carried an undercurrent of suspicion that made Winona tense. Before she could respond, Adam straightened from his position against the wall. I've worked ranches across the territory, he replied evenly. Most recently in Wyoming. I've taken a position at the Hamilton spread west of town. Mr. Hamilton, a weather-beaten man with a silver beard, spoke up from his seat. That's right. Quincy came with references from the Circle T in Wyoming, good with horses from what I hear. The endorsement from a respected rancher seemed to satisfy most of the crowd, though Jake still looked suspicious. Mayor Thornton quickly moved to conclude the meeting, announcing that refreshments were available in the churchyard. As people filed out, Winona made her way to where Adam stood, aware of curious glances following her progress. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. Wouldn't have missed it, he replied. You were impressive up there. These people are lucky to have you teaching their children. Winona smiled, warmed by his praise. Will you join us for refreshments? Adam glanced toward the door where townspeople were gathering in small clusters, some openly watching their interaction. I should probably head back to the ranch, first day and all. Disappointment flared in Winona, but she understood his reluctance. When will I see you again? Sunday, perhaps, he suggested. I've the day off and I thought maybe we could, that is, if you'd like to. I would love to, Winona said, saving him from his awkward attempt at an invitation. Perhaps a picnic. I've been told there's a lovely spot by the river just outside town. Adam's face lit up with a smile that transformed his features. Sunday it is then. I'll call for you at the boarding house at noon. With a tip of his hat, he departed, leaving Winona to join the townspeople in the churchyard. As she mingled, answering questions and accepting welcomes, she caught Mrs. Haggerty watching her with a knowing expression. The older woman approached after most of the crowd had dispersed. That cowboy of yours seems to have decided to stay around, she commented, handing Winona a cup of punch. Mr. Quincy has found employment at the Hamilton Ranch, Winona replied carefully. Mrs. Haggerty snorted. Convenient that. Well, I won't presume to tell you your business, Miss Keller, but do remember what I said about small towns and big ears. I appreciate your concern, Winona said evenly, but my personal associations are my own affair. The boarding house keeper raised an eyebrow. They are until they affect your standing in the community. Just be careful, that's all I'm saying. With that warning, she moved away, leaving Winona to ponder the challenges ahead. The path she and Adam had chosen would not be easy, but she was determined to follow it nonetheless. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity as Winona prepared for the opening of the school. She met with parents, organized her classroom in the small schoolhouse at the edge of town, and finalized her lesson plans for students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Sunday couldn't come quickly enough. When Adam appeared at the boarding house precisely at noon, Winona was waiting on the porch, a picnic basket borrowed from Mrs. Haggerty at her feet. He had made an effort with his appearance, wearing a clean shirt and his best pair of trousers, his hair still damp from washing. You look beautiful, he said simply as she descended the steps to meet him. Winona blushed, pleased by the compliment. She had chosen her pale blue dress specifically for the occasion, knowing it brought out the color of her eyes. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." Adam offered his arm, and together they walked through town toward the river, conscious of curious glances from Sunday churchgoers returning home. Winona held her head high, refusing to be intimidated by the scrutiny. The spot by the river was as lovely as promised, a grassy bank shaded by cottonwood trees, with the water flowing gently past. They spread a blanket and unpacked the food Mrs. Haggerty had prepared: fried chicken, biscuits, apple pie, and a jug of lemonade. "How are things at the ranch?" Winona asked as they settled down to eat. "Good," Adam replied. "Hamilton's a fair employer and the work suits me. How are your preparations for school coming along?" They talked easily as they ate, catching up on the days they'd spent apart. Adam described the Hamilton ranch and its operations, while Winona shared her plans for the school and her impressions of Julesburg's residents. "Most have been welcoming," she said, "though I sense some are reserving judgment until they see how I manage their children." "They'll come around," Adam assured her. "You have a gift for teaching. I could see it in the way you spoke at the meeting." After they finished eating, they walked along the riverbank, talking about everything and nothing. Adam told her more about his life before they met, growing up on a small farm in Missouri, learning ranching from his uncle after his parents died, meeting and marrying his wife Sarah when they were both barely 20. "She was a lot like you in some ways," he admitted quietly. "Strong-willed, determined. She believed in making our own path rather than following others." "She sounds remarkable," Winona said, touched that he would share these memories with her. "She was," Adam agreed, "and she would have liked you." He looked at Winona with an intensity that made her breath catch. "She wouldn't have wanted me to spend the rest of my life alone." The implication of his words hung between them, full of possibility. Winona stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "Adam, before she could continue, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as Winona responded, her arms sliding around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that since the night of the storm," Adam confessed, his forehead resting against hers. "What took you so long?" Winona teased, her heart racing with joy. They spent the remainder of the afternoon by the river, talking, laughing, and occasionally stealing kisses when they were certain no one was around to see. As the sun began to set, Adam reluctantly mentioned that he should return her to the boarding house before dark. "When can I see you again?" Winona asked as they walked back toward town, her hand tucked in the crook of his arm. "I have Wednesdays off as well," Adam replied, "and I could ride into town some evenings if you'd like." "I would like that very much," she said, smiling up at him. Their courtship developed slowly over the following weeks. Adam visited Winona whenever his work at the ranch permitted, sometimes simply walking with her after school, other times taking her for rides in the countryside surrounding Julesburg. The school term began successfully, with Winona quickly winning the respect of both her students and their parents. Her innovative teaching methods and genuine care for each child's progress made her a valued member of the community, though there were still whispers about her friendship with that cowboy from the Hamilton place. Mrs. Haggerty observed their growing relationship with resignation rather than opposition, eventually conceding that Adam Quincy seemed to be a decent sort for a drifter. Coming from her, it was high praise indeed. One Wednesday in late spring, Adam took Winona to a secluded spot in the hills overlooking Julesburg. They had brought a picnic lunch, and after eating, they sat side by side watching the distant activity of the town below. "Hard to believe it's been almost 3 months since we met," Adam commented, his arm around Winona's shoulders. "The best 3 months of my life," she replied honestly. Adam turned to face her, his expression serious. "Winona, there's something I need to ask you," her heart quickened. "Yes." "I've been saving my wages," he began. And Mr. Hamilton has offered me a permanent position as his foreman. It comes with a small house on the property." Winona waited, hardly daring to breathe. "I know it's not much to offer a woman like you," Adam continued, "but I love you, Winona Keller. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Joy bubbled up inside her, so intense it was almost painful. "Are you asking me to marry you, Adam Quincy?" He smiled, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small ring, simple but beautiful, with a pearl set in silver. "I am, will you?" "Yes," Winona answered without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." Adam slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. They were married in the Julesburg church 2 weeks later, with the entire town in attendance, even Mrs. Haggerty shed a tear during the ceremony, though she later denied it vehemently. Mayor Thornton himself gave the bride away, and Dr. Patterson served as Adam's best man. The school board had initially expressed concern about Winona continuing to teach after her marriage, but she had firmly informed them that she intended to fulfill her contract until they found a suitable replacement. Privately, she hoped that might take some time, as she had grown to love teaching the children of Julesburg. Their first home together was the foreman's house on the Hamilton Ranch, a small but sturdy 2-room cabin with a view of the distant mountains. Winona rode to town each day to teach, and Adam accompanied her whenever his duties permitted. One evening in late autumn, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Winona turned to her husband with a smile that held a secret. "I have some news," she said, taking his hand and placing it gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." The joy that spread across Adam's face was like nothing Winona had ever seen. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "A baby," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." The news spread quickly through Julesburg, greeted with congratulations and well wishes. The school board, accepting the inevitable, began their search for a new teacher to take over when Winona's condition became more advanced. As winter settled over the Colorado territory, Winona and Adam prepared for the changes ahead. They converted half of their second room into a nursery, and Adam built a cradle from pine harvested on the ranch property. "You ever think about how we met?" Winona asked one snowy evening as they sat before the fire, her needlework in her lap, Adam whittling a small wooden horse for their child. "Every day," he replied, looking up from his work. "That broken axle was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me." Winona smiled, setting aside her sewing to move to his side. "To think I was so distraught when it happened. I had no idea it was leading me to everything I never knew I wanted." Adam pulled her close, his hand resting protectively over their growing child. "Sometimes the best journeys are the ones we never plan to take." Their son, Daniel James Quincy, was born on a clear spring morning in 1876, with Mrs. Haggerty serving as midwife and Adam pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door. When finally allowed in to see his wife and newborn son, Adam wept unashamedly, overwhelmed by the miracle before him. "He's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the downy hair on his son's head, "just like his mother." Life settled into a new rhythm with Daniel's arrival. Winona resigned her teaching position but continued to tutor several students who came to the ranch for lessons. Adam's work as foreman kept him busy, but he always made time for his family, often carrying Daniel on his shoulders as he checked fences or tended livestock. By the time Daniel was 2, Winona was expecting their second child. The small foreman's house was becoming cramped, and they began discussing the possibility of building their own place. "Hamilton's offered me a partnership," Adam revealed one evening after Daniel had been put to bed. "A small stake in the ranch in exchange for my continued management." Winona's eyes widened. "Adam, that's wonderful news. There's more," he continued, excitement evident in his voice. "There's a parcel of land at the eastern edge of the property, about 50 acres with good water access. Hamilton's offering it as part of the deal. We could build there, Winona, a proper home for our family. The prospect filled her with joy. Our own land, our own home. Oh, Adam, it's everything we dreamed of. Construction began that summer, with Adam working on the house whenever he could spare time from his ranch duties. Friends from town and cowhands from the ranch pitched in, raising the frame in a single day during a community barn raising. By autumn, with Winona's pregnancy advancing, the house was complete enough for them to move in 4 rooms downstairs and 2 upstairs, with a wide porch wrapping around the front and side. It was far grander than anything either of them had dared hope for when they first met. From a broken wagon axle to this, Winona marveled as they stood on their porch, watching Daniel play in the yard. Life takes the most unexpected turns. Adam pulled her close, his hand resting on her rounded belly where their second child grew. I thank God every day for that broken axle and for the stubborn schoolteacher who wouldn't let me ride away. Their daughter, Eliza Sarah Quincy, arrived just before Christmas, completing their family circle. As they gathered around the fire that first Christmas in their new home, with Daniel excitedly opening presents and baby Eliza sleeping peacefully in her cradle, Winona and Adam exchanged a look of perfect understanding. They had each been traveling alone, broken in their own ways, when fate brought them together on that dusty trail outside of Julesburg. In finding each other, they had found not just repair but renewal, a love that had transformed their separate journeys into a shared adventure neither could have imagined. "Merry Christmas, my love," Adam whispered, leaning over to kiss his wife. "Merry Christmas," Winona replied, her heart full to bursting with gratitude for the life they had built together. And to many more. As the years passed, the Quincy family prospered. Adam's partnership with Hamilton eventually led to his purchase of the entire ranch when the older man retired, and the Quincy spread became known throughout the territory for its fine horses and cattle. Winona never returned to formal teaching, but their home became a center of learning nonetheless. With books filling the shelves, Adam built and children from neighboring ranches, often joining Daniel and Eliza for lessons at the big kitchen table. They added a 3rd child to their family, another son, Thomas, born 5 years after Eliza, and watched with pride as all 3 children grew into kind, capable young adults with their father's courage and their mother's determination. Sometimes, on summer evenings when the work was done and the children were occupied with their own activities, Winona and Adam would sit on their porch, hands intertwined, and marvel at the journey that had brought them to this place of contentment. "You know," Adam would say with a twinkle in his eye that time had never diminished, "I've fixed a lot of wagon axles in my day, but none as important as yours." And Winona would laugh and lean her head on his shoulder, knowing that some breaks lead not to endings but to the most beautiful beginnings.